Professor Yosef Ben Shlomo is the intellectual darling of the Israeli right. A professor of Jewish philosophy, he was once a liberal-leaning peace campaigner, but transformed into an ultra-nationalist and moved to live in the seminal settlement of Kedumim on the West Bank. For the last few years, he has been struggling manfully to maintain his teaching and to maintain contact with his students and followers, though battling a life-sapping cancer. During the holiday week, he agreed to a pilgrimage by his students for one final lesson, and he told them that they'd given him a taste for life. What does a man want to leave behind? A book or students, he asked. I chose to teach. But then he chose to take his leave of them with a very gloomy message. After 1967, he confirmed he had been a signatory to a petition by leading academics who opposed the idea, then being born, of the right of Jews to settle in and to annex the West Bank, which had fallen to Israel's control in the war that year. In my innocence, said Ben Shlomo, after the 6-day victory, I believed the Arabs would understand that they have to come to terms with us. Then came the Khartoum conference and the 3 Arab no's, no negotiations, no recognition, no peace with Israel. Then came terror, and I returned to my traditional roots. He comes from a religious Zionist home, and concluded that I was right, it was right, to promote a deep connection between the Jewish people and the land of Israel. I joined the settlement enterprise. But at the end of the emotional gathering, when asked by a television reporter, is he optimistic or pessimistic about the future of Israel, the normally strong-spoken and equally strong-willed Ben Shlomo, now barely audible, shed a tear and mumbled sadly, "Pessimistic, oh, so pessimistic." His pessimism is rooted in the belief that the philosophy of Greater Israel, of the settlement enterprise, is doomed and has been spurned by a majority of Israelis. But it's exactly for the same reason, only in reverse, that there's just as much pessimism on the Israeli left. There, the pessimism is not so much because a majority of Israelis have spurned the settlement enterprise, but because they're prepared to ignore its advances. That, in the view of the left, means that the settlement philosophy is not at all doomed. It is the settlers, they stress, who continue to dictate the direction in which Israel is going, and to thwart the possibility of any genuine, lasting peace with the Palestinians. The latest focal point in this ongoing battle for the future of Israel is a large building which settlers purchased from the Palestinian owner and which they've taken over on the outskirts of Hebron. As the future of their move hovers between Israel's political and legal arenas, so far the settlers seem to be winning the day. The building is known as the House of Dispute, but as the Tel Aviv Daily Haaretz said in an editorial, it's not a house at all, it's a full settlement. It lies on 3,500 square meters, and already for the past 3 weeks, more than 30 families and 14 single people have lived there. On Wednesday, the Attorney General, Menachem Mazuz, said that the settlers should be allowed to petition the High Court of Justice against any eviction, which was being contemplated by the Defense Ministry. Therefore, Mazuz said, they could not be evacuated immediately. According to Mazuz, the settlers inhabiting the building, which they claim to own after having paid $700,000 for it, cannot be defined as an invasion, and they are therefore not subject to immediate eviction. The Attorney General was responding to a request from Defense Minister Amir Peretz, who maintained that he wants the settlers evicted right away. But so far, he is being thwarted. Now, Yossi Sarid, one of the darlings of the Israeli left, writes passionately of the impasse. There is nothing new under the Hebron sun. What has been will be again. 40 years ago, Moshe Levinger took advantage of the government's then weakness and blindness and of the rivalries and intrigues of its ministers to create a first renewed Jewish presence in Hebron. The 1967 settlements were established through chicanery. Through trickery, they continue to be founded in 2007, says Sarid, and he goes on. The settlers carefully paid the Palestinians 400 silver shekels, just as our father Abraham had paid Ephron the Hittite to purchase the Machpelah cave. However, Abraham wished to bury the dead and to be buried himself in the place known as Kiryat Arba. The settlers, on the other hand, says Sarid, want only to rule and to expel. And he concludes, Jewish settlement in Hebron was born in sin and lives in sin. The essence of occupation is patently illegal. Only its transience makes it acceptable. But for the settlers, temporary means for eternity. Some additional facts. During 2006, the settler population grew by nearly 6% to a total of 268,000, as existing settlements continue to expand. While the Israeli government stopped approving new settlements in the wake of the 1993 Oslo Accords, settlers have been establishing more than 100 outposts, so-called outposts, hilltop clumps of mobile homes. The government has either helped or looked the other way. Following the acceptance of the internationally backed roadmap to peace, Israel was supposed to evacuate the outposts, and Defence Minister Peretz, the Labour Party leader, keeps promising that he will remove them. But he has lacked the will to do so, or the backing from Prime Minister Ehud Olmert to do so. And on some hilltops, permanent houses are replacing the mobile homes. The Prime Minister's own public position is that to maintain a Jewish majority in Israel, Israel must give up most of the West Bank. Nonetheless, he promises to hold on to the larger settlements, and he continues building there, and it seems to allow the settle movement to continue creating new facts. Says Gershom Gorenberg, the Israeli author of the book The Accidental Empire, Israel and the Birth of the Settlements in the Decade After 1967, says Gorenberg, cold analysis of what is best for Israel clearly isn't enough to stop the momentum of historical habits. Indeed, little seems to have changed. The settlement enterprise thrives and flourishes and continues to expand in various ways. Who then has reason to be pessimistic, the supporters or the opponents of the settlers' purpose? Despite different declarations of Israeli leaders, the answer seems clear. The settlers' design for the future of Israel's borders, their philosophical direction in which Israel ought to be headed, does indeed continue to hold sway.